Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with a German-born woman who, as a young girl, lived in war-torn Germany and survived the harrowing experience of World War II, Miss Edith Röpke. Did I say that right, Röpke?
Yes, you know, Röpke.
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 If you say it in German, it's Röpke.
Röpke.
I'll try to remember that. She has a lovely German accent, Röpke. With her is a longtime friend, Miss Cecelia Wilson, an author with an insatiable appetite for the stories of World War II and who has written the book Back to Bremen about Edith's childhood. And what a childhood it was. Through the eyes of a child, Edith tells her story of nightly raids, bomb shelters, sleeping in her clothes, shoes ready, sleeping outside, and walking, hungry, with her 7 siblings across Germany. Also about the silence that had to be kept, about the children and families that disappeared, about her father who, for lack of a better word, was abducted one night at dinner to serve in the Nazi army, and how, not long after, her eldest brother, Gunter, was taken and recruited as a Nazi youth. Today we will speak with Miss Cecelia Wilson about writing the book, Back to Bremen, about her life as a preacher's wife and contributing reporter to Arkansas' Searcy Living magazine, and with Frau Edith Röpke about her German family's journey and her mother's courage and self-determination that kept her 8 children safe, fed, and together as they walked, rode, and scurried across bombed-out Germany. It is my pleasure to welcome to the table author Miss Cecelia Wilson and her protagonist, Miss Edith Röpke, of the book Back to Bremen. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Kerry. Thank you so much for having us both.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell our listeners that we had to wait till Edith got both of her shots, COVID shots, before we got together. So, Edith, you have a lovely German accent. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I could not put this book down, and I want to tell our listeners it's Back to Bremen by Cecelia Wilson. It is so good. I highly recommend reading it. As a mother, I felt your mother. I felt like I was walking in her shoes. And as as having once been a 5-year-old girl and knowing how, I don't know, when I was a 5-year-old girl, I felt always, a little bit scared something would happen to my parents. I mean, I cannot imagine being a 5-year-old girl doing all of that also. So I walked in both of those characters' shoes. So, Cecelia, this book is written from the point of view of this 5-year-old girl. Did you find it hard to write? Is that called first person?
It was interesting that you would ask that, because I started this book 2 or 3 different ways, and then I would just think, I've got to start over again. This is not the voice I want to tell it in. And finally, it dawned on me that I needed to write it in Edith's voice. As this child, because then, as you said, you as a reader could really understand the fear that she was going through. She could talk about that. So when I finally decided that's the voice that I need to write it in, it really came so easy after that. But I think it's probably like anything. You have to experiment a little bit. I started one direction, and then, well, that's not going to work as well. When I finally realized Edith was the voice that I wanted to use, then it was simple after that.
How long did it take you to write it?
Months, absolutely months. I would go to Edith's house. We're very good friends, and we live close beside one another in Cabot. I would go to her house and interview her, and then I would write a little at a time. She would help me edit it and make sure that I was kind of, on track with
accurate.
Yes, with the accuracy, absolutely. So it was months and months in writing it. And then I speak to a lot of different school groups, and I'm always reminded by the teachers to remind the kids that this is an ongoing process. You don't write it, it's done, and that's it. You can put it to bed. Editing is constant. I mean, she was my first editor. I let my daughter be my second, because it's got to be pretty nice and clean before you get it to a prospective publisher. Obviously, if you don't have a good product before you put it in front of them, they're not even going to give you the time of day. So I knew it needed to be, pretty clean by the time I got it to prospective publishers as I was doing submissions. And then what's funny is once I finally found a publisher, one of the first things they did was assign another editor. So we go through the whole process again. But even though that's a lot of work, I can absolutely tell you this was a labor of love. Loved every bit of it. Matter of fact, my publisher assigned an editor to me from Missouri State University. And he laughed at me and he said, "What is wrong with you? I have never seen an editor who loved an author who loves the editing process." And I said, "Well, to me, that's just part of making this whole read better for the reader. So it's part of the fun. Even though it's work, it's part of the fun." So,
is this your first book?
It's not my first book to have written. It is my first book to have been published. And then I'm a feature writer for Searcy Living, which I've been doing for, 20 years or so. So I've had plenty of practice writing, but writing a book is certainly, and particularly one about a true story, it's a process. Definitely, it is a process.
Yeah, it's a long. It's writing a short story or for a magazine. You start it, you finish it.
Right.
I'm not sure how you ever put all those pieces of paper together to do it. Did you use Scrivener or some piece of software?
No, actually. Good old Word. I mean, that's all I did, and to get my notes, I just made notes. I taped a lot with Edith. I knew Edith's story in particular very well because I've known Edith for 20 years. So I've written about her story. I loved it. And I have written it in article format for magazines several times over the years. But as you said, an article is a shortened version of a story. You can hit the highlights, and that's about it. So I thought I knew the story. But when we got down to writing this, book, I realized, there was a lot of detail that certainly was missing in an article. And what was so much fun about doing a more in-depth interview with Edith for the book was I realized just how much more rich this story was. This is, I say this all the time, this is a story about Edith's childhood, certainly. But what I realized when I interviewed her for the book was this is actually a story about her mother.
It is. It absolutely is.
It is. She is the heroine of this story. And what I love about her being the heroine of this story is the fact that she's not some, popular celebrity. She's not anything extraordinary other than a mother.
She's extraordinary.
Well, she is.
Oh, yeah.
She is.
But find out. Yeah.
Absolutely. But, the point is that...
we all are.
Yes. And what I like about that is, and again, when I'm speaking to groups, particularly to young people, I like to tell them, hey, personally, I could never aspire to be Beyonce or Tom Brady. But now I've got someone that I can point to you in Martha Röpke. I can aspire to be a great mother. I can aspire to do the things that she did that were, in my mind, so heroic. And she wasn't necessarily a hero to anyone but her family. But, man, at the end of the day, if you can say that, what a successful life you've had.
That's right. Before we get into Edith's life story, tell me how the two of y'all met.
Well,
that's a long story.
That's a long story. Well, I'll shorten it. How about that? My husband is a Baptist minister, as well as being an estate planning attorney, but he's a Baptist minister.
Those don't go together, do they? Oh, no, they go together perfectly. You got to plan it all for when you're gone. Oh, it's perfect.
And then he's still around.
There you go.
Yeah, he did our estate.
He did. That is right. You're preparing for the afterlife in all while you're here. That's perfect.
Yeah.
It's
financially and spiritually.
Similarities.
Financially and spiritually.
It really does. You're feeding the soul in different ways. You really are.
Okay.
And we met. He accepted this church in near Cabot, and the Harrises. Edith's married name is Harris. She and her husband Hank were members of our church, and so we've known each other for 25 years, something like that. So I've known her story that long, and loved it ever since.
What piqued your interest about it? How did you first get your interest piqued?
Well, I'm a history buff, and again, I've always loved to write, and mainly what I do with Searcy Living, for instance, is interview people from all different walks of life, senators or governors or first ladies or just people with interesting stories. And everyone has an interesting story. They really do. So when I first heard Edith, and I think I was actually, the first time I ever wrote it was just for a little newsletter for our church. So it was even shorter than a magazine article.
So
it was
that's
just
how
a few
you found it
paragraphs.
out.
Yeah, I sat down and interviewed her, and I was amazed. Her husband, Hank, was a long, tall Texan with a very deep voice. He was very impressive.
With the perfect
loved
name,
him.
Hank.
Harris. Henry Harris. They called him Hank. And he had an interesting story. Matter of fact, they met because he was in the United States Air Force in the 50s, and they met in Germany. Mm-hmm. He brought her over here. Mm-hmm. But it was Edith's story that just stayed with me. I love World War II. I'd never heard what I love about Edith's story, her mother's story, is that it is such a different perspective. You do hear the Jewish Holocaust stories, and I'm thrilled they're out there.
Right.
They are numerous. But you don't often hear the stories of, well, what happened to just a regular German family? How were they affected by the war? Well, obviously they're affected, particularly if you live in a city like Bremen. They're making warplanes and U-boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, air raids were common, obviously, throughout those war years in her childhood. So I'd never really heard that perspective. And I think it's a really interesting perspective that people need to hear.
Right.
There's two sides.
That, like you said, you can relate to. So, right. Edith, it's your turn. Cecelia told me you didn't necessarily think your story was worthy of a book.
That's right.
Why not?
Nobody wanted to read that. They just, there's so much out there about World War II. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, people probably tired of it.
When did you change your mind?
After my husband passed.
When was that? 2011?
13.
2013?
13.
So Cecelia kind of beat up on you long enough till you finally said, okay, we'll write a book.
She twisted, like I said, she twisted my arm and twisted it, and she bugged me about it.
Lovingly
bugged her about it.
And after that, my husband passed in October, and then right after the holidays, she approached me again, her and her daughter. We got to do this book. I said, no way. Because I had a lot of offers before. People asked me to tell the story, and they would write about it. But I always turned them down. I said, no. She won.
I did win. I won, didn't I, Kerry?
So a lot of people have asked you about this story.
Oh, yeah. I used to work at the air base. And there was this one supervisor, Joan was her name, and she said, we got to write your story. We got to write your book. I said, no, Joan, no, we're not going to do that. So
you changed your mind. So this book, I feel like, is almost a love letter to your mother. And Cia kind of mentioned that. It's a book of prose paying homage to your mother that later, as an adult, you probably recognize that as you look back.
Yes.
Talk about looking back on your mother and what you thought.
Well, as a child, you just go with the flow, all the, everything going on, and just, we had to do what we were told. And but I didn't realize till later on, till
you became a mother.
Yes. And then I realized, I don't know if I would be able to go through with this.
Yeah, you really recognize how hard it was as you become a...
Yes.
So this is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Miss Cecelia Wilson, author of the nonfiction book, Back to Bremen, a memoir written through the eyes of a 5-year-old German girl who survived the war-torn years of World War II under Nazi-ruled Germany. Joining Cecelia is her friend and the book's protagonist, Fräulein Edith Röpke. Still to come, Edith's journey, how her German mother, Marta, risked it all through air raids, capture, and the cruelties of the Third Reich to keep her 8 children safe, fed, and together as they walked, rode, and scurried across bombed-out Germany under the rule of a madman, Adolf Hitler. Danke, Marta. Thanks, Mom. We'll be back.
Do you have something to say? Say it in flying colors. I'm Megan McCoy, and my family owns and operates flagandbanner.com. We believe that flags tell a story and banners make an impression. Whether it's for your business, organization, or special event, custom flags and banners will make your message soar. Visit flagandbanner.com for high-quality products and quick turnaround. We're not just any flag company. We're the experts that answer the phone.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Miss Cecelia Wilson, author of the nonfiction book Back to Bremen. And with her is Miss Edith Röpke. It is Edith's real life and harrowing true story that is told in this memoir through the eyes of a 5-year-old girl living in Germany during World War II. Let's start. You started, Cecelia, with chapter 1 called The End of the Road. It's actually... The book begins at the war's end in 1945. Why start the book at the end and then go backwards?
I'm so glad you asked that. I think as an author, you know that, and I'm this way when I read, you like to have a hook. You want to immediately pique someone's interest. So I really debated part of the debate that the internal debate that I was having. Where do I start? Do I start, as in chapter 2, I believe I start with 1939 and then begin, because it takes about a decade, this book does. I love this particular story that I start with. It is a story about Edith and her brother, Karl Heinz. They're hungry. They're on the road back to Bremen, hence the title of the book, Back to Bremen. And they steal some bread. I just thought it was a compelling story, a little lighthearted in the midst of everything, all the chaos that's going on. I just thought it was a great place to start, and really kind of helped, I thought, introduce you to all the characters. So when it dawned on me that's where I wanted to start, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to write that first chapter because I just thought that was a great place to start. And then you could backtrack. You've been introduced to the characters, and then you can get back to the beginning. And I like that as a reader too. I've struggled with some books sometimes when I read them, and you know that you're going through that process of having to get to know everyone. So I thought this was a good way to not only introduce you to their names, but here's a little example of their personalities.
So that didn't come from an editor. That was your idea.
Oh, no. That was me.
That was a great idea.
Thanks.
And so chapter 2, you titled it, And So It Began in 1939. Edith, you start talking about sleeping in your clothes, running for bomb shelters every night. Tell us about that.
Well, we started in 39, September, when my dad was having supper at the dining room table in the kitchen, and these 2 Gestapos came in and got my dad. They said, "You're in a war." That's the last time we saw him for a long time, for probably a couple of years or more.
How did that feel? You're just sitting there at the table.
I know. We was having our supper there. We had our dinner, and so my mom was by herself with us.
She was pregnant, wasn't she?
Not in 39. No.
Yes, she was. Because my youngest brother was, no, you're right.
Yeah.
No,
not quite.
No,
yeah,
because he was born in 40. My youngest brother, he just passed last year.
So what was it like sleeping in bed with all of your sisters? Because the boys slept together and the girls slept together, and you slept in your clothes with your shoes
by
by
the
the
big metal bed, and we all had to sleep, but we always had to be dressed because the sirens went off all the time. You never know when they're gonna go off. You had to go to bunker. So at night, we just went to bed with our clothes on, had our shoes in front of the bed, and we all slept, like I said, in one bed. That's all we had.
So on the way, one day, on the way running to a bomb shelter, your mother fell.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. It was, there was no lights, no electricity, no nothing. And our house was like over this way. And the bunker was right in the center on the houses. So we didn't have that far to run. But we was running because the sirens already went off and we had to be in there.
You only have a limited amount of time to get there, right?
Yes, that's right.
And then they shut the door and it's locked, and if you're
yes.
out, you're out.
Yes. So, but she fell. And that's what she had my youngest brother.
So she fell
On the street. She had it, and there was no doctor, no nothing.
8 months pregnant.
She fell, and you went on to the bunker.
We went to the bunker. We didn't want to go. We didn't want to leave her. So
why did you leave her?
Well, they made us go.
The people in the street?
Yes. The neighbors.
Scooted you along.
The neighbors and strangers, and they all took care of us, for my mama. And we didn't know till it was all over with what happened.
So you were in the bunker all night, or how long were you in the bunker waiting to find out what happened to your mother?
It usually takes all night, yes.
What'd you do all night sitting in there? Tell us how you
just
felt.
Sit there.
Crying?
And, cry for mama, and no daddy, no mama, no. So just with strangers in a cold place. And because those bunkers were cold. And
how many people would be in a bunker?
I don't know.
A lot.
Yeah.
Did you sit down or stand up?
People, the whole area where we lived.
You would stand up or sit down?
No, there was benches in there to sit down on it, yes.
And so it's morning, so you're crying all night, waiting to get out to see what happened to your mother, and you come out, and what happened?
And then we found out we had a brother.
That's so crazy.
It is.
I know.
So crazy.
And we want to know where he came from. Because he told us the story about the stork. There was sugar on the windowsill.
Oh, my gosh.
The old-timey story. And my mom used to say that. Because when we asked her, because she had babies all the time. And she, but anyway, she didn't go to the hospital. The house we lived in was bombed 3 times. And this time it got bombed. She was in the house, but no water, no electricity, no nothing.
So you took the baby back to your bombed out house?
Yes.
How did you repair the windows?
She didn't have a doctor. She had one of those midwives.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she had.
So when you come out of the shelter, are there dead people laying around on the street?
Oh, yes. You just go, you step, and you're not allowed to touch them or check on them.
You're not?
No, because you wasn't allowed to touch them, make sure they're okay or something. But we figured most of them were dead anyway.
So these are people that were running to the bomb shelter that didn't get in time.
That's right. That's right.
And so your mother's out there this
and
one night.
all ages, kids, grown-ups. So.
Do you have bad dreams about that?
Sometimes I do, not that often, no.
So what do you think when you come out and do you just become numb to it, I guess?
That was our life. We didn't know any different at that time because it was whole 6 years. And we just had to go what we was told.
Just do what you're told. Thank you, Marta. So you go to your house to see if it's been bombed. Every morning you come out or practically, it got to where it was almost every night, didn't it?
Oh, every day, yes.
Every day. And you come back to your house to see if it's still standing. And usually the windows are blown out.
Oh, yeah, there's always damage.
And how do you repair that?
You don't. You just live there like they just clean up. I remember people cleaning up what they could, because there was, what can you do when the bomb comes, you know? And the Americans were daytime bombers, but the English were at night.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we had day and night.
Bremen was destroyed.
Yes.
Completely
It was.
destroyed.
Yes.
Why was it such a target for everyone?
Well, because it was a port, main port. All the ships come from overseas. And they had the factories there, the U-boats and stuff, you know. And then Bremerhaven, which is the sister city, was about 15 minutes apart. In Hamburg, Germany, there were all three of them was ports, main ports. They got bombed all the time. There was nothing left.
It's amazing that your mother had this baby in the street.
I know.
And then goes home with it. And that baby is fine. Is that baby still, is your little sister, or is it a little brother or little sister?
Brother.
Is he still alive?
No, he passed away last year.
So, he lived all this time.
Yes.
And, well, in a minute, when the listeners hear all that you did, it's going to be amazing. Any of y'all are alive. But let's talk about your dad. He was an only child.
Yes.
Is that why he wanted so many children?
I don't know. I guess just...
Was your mother an only child?
No, she had one brother. We had one uncle. And he passed away. He got the house. He was painting the house, my grandparents' house. And he was painting the outside the house. They had a bomb attack. And that's how he got killed, her only brother. Mm-hmm. So there was nobody left. She was the only one survived.
That was in 44.
Right before the end of the war, pretty close to the end of the war.
August of 44.
44, yes.
So also, not long after your father was drafted into the Nazi regime, they showed up at your house?
Yes.
For your brother, for your oldest brother. And he was now the head of the family.
Yeah, he was drafted. They just came in and said, because I guess they needed all the guys, to fight the war. And they even took the younger ones, the teenagers, because he was about 14, somewhere in that area. So, and he's the only one that really helped my mom, but the rest of the kids,
Mm-hmm. They're all under 12, except for him.
Yes.
So he's now the man of the household.
Yes.
Gets a rap on the door. Nazis come in and say, all right, Nazi youth, come on. She's like, what does your mother think now? What am I going to do?
Yeah. Just go on and do the best you can.
Yeah. She's a hero. Mm-hmm. All right. This is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Miss Cecelia Wilson, author of the memoir and inspiring true story, Back to Bremen, and the leading lady in the book, Frau Edith Röpke, the once 5-year-old little German girl who, with her brothers and sisters, lived through the war-torn years of World War II under Nazi rule and the ruinous behavior of a madman, Adolf Hitler, in his quest to create Aryan utopia. When we come back, we're going to talk about having to leave Bremen and where they were evacuated to. We'll be back after the break.
Flag season is here, and Arkansas's flagandbanner.com has everything you need to freshen up your home with a little red, white, and blue. Bunting is a great way to dress up the front of any house, porch, or fence line. Easily spruce up your yard with stick flags and garden banners, and our wide selection of decorative door hangers will make all your guests feel right at home. You can shop online or come see us in our historic showroom in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas's flagandbanner.com. We're the experts.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Edith Röpke.
Good effort.
Thank you. Also known as today Edith Harris, her maiden name, and Miss Cecelia Wilson, star and author respectively of the nonfiction book Back to Bremen. Edith's real life and harrowing true story is told in this memoir through her eyes as a 5-year-old girl living in Germany during World War II. All right. You are about to be evacuated from Bremen, it's a port city that's just getting bombed in the day by the Americans and bombed by the English at night. People are laying around all over the street when you come out of the bomb shelters, and you're just stepping over them. There's glass everywhere. I remember reading in the book, you didn't say that earlier, but all that other stuff that I just mentioned, you did talk about in the earlier section. But I do remember reading in the book that you couldn't play outside because there was too dangerous.
Yes. We didn't have no childhood. I mean, if we could do anything with a child, like you said, we couldn't go outside.
And not just because of the bombing, but because of the glass and the debris and to get cut and stuff like that.
And the bodies, it took time to get rid of the bodies.
Did it smell bad?
Oh, yes, it did. Yes.
Ugh.
All right. They have come, the Nazis have come and said, everybody has got to leave Bremen. And they relocate you. Now,
anybody, especially the large family.
They relocated you?
Yes.
So they tell you, do they pay for you to move all your stuff, or how do they do these relocations when they're going to evacuate a city? How do they do it?
But whatever was left in our house, they shipped to Crumham stuff.
Yeah, don't ask me to say that. I'll just tell everybody it's right outside of Dresden, the beautiful city of Dresden.
Well, she used to say crummy.
Crummy. That's, it's so long.
Say it again.
Crumham stuff.
Okay, what's funny about that? There's only like 3 vowels in it.
Come stuff. That's not that hard.
But it's like 29
letters.
Yeah.
But it's outside of Dresden. If you all know Dresden, because they got the China, that's the most expensive China you can get. And so we used to go to Dresden by train. We went to the opera house, to the zoo, and all that, because Crumhamstoff is just a little village.
So they've come and they're going to move you. They tell you to pack up your stuff. They put you on a train.
Yes.
Give you an address, I guess.
Yes.
Your mother takes her whole brood of children under 12. Now she's down to 7 because the oldest one has been taken into the Nazi youth, has been drafted into the Nazi youth. And you go to live, and you pull up in front of this house, and it's beautiful. And what do you think?
We couldn't believe it, but we'd have to live in our attic.
Did you think at first, I'm going to live in this beautiful house?
We did, because they actually had red carpet going to the front door.
Wow.
Yes. And but we had to go to the back door. We wasn't allowed to use the front door.
Because you found out the house belonged to?
A Nazi.
Colonel Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer, yes. And he had a wife and one son, and we wasn't allowed to play with this boy, with his son. So like I said, we had to use the back door. We couldn't use the front door. So, and back then, you always had to say hi, Hitler. Instead of good day or good evening, you had to raise your arm and say hi, Hitler. If you don't, they shoot you. And this is the honest truth. They shoot you first, ask questions later.
Why were y'all not allowed to? You're not Jewish. Why were you not allowed to play with the
They wouldn't let us.
Because you're white trash or something?
He was mean guy.
Well, any Nazi, aren't they all?
I would guess, there was a
Classism.
social.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think he felt like he was in a different stratosphere than
His wife
family.
was really nice. She was nice to my mom and everything, They became friends. Not close friends, but friends. They would talk and stuff. And then one night, my sister, Helga is the oldest one, the girls, she went out one night, and then when she come home, she came the back way, and he was in the hallway.
She came the front way, you mean?
The front way.
She came in the front door instead of the back door.
Where she shouldn't have been.
She shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. That's right, I'm sorry. But anyway, and he was in the hallway, and she didn't salute him. So she went upstairs, and the next day my mom, and he said, if you don't instruct your kids to say hi Hitler, that he told her what happened the night before with Helga, that she didn't salute him. And he said, you're never going to see her again. So we assumed, he's going to kill her or drag her off somewhere.
Your own countrymen, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But they didn't.
No.
Because that was a warning.
She instructed, she was at us all the time. She told us, say hi Hitler, say hi Hitler. Because as a kid, we don't know why we had to say that, why we couldn't just say, good morning, Herr Pfeiffer, or,
Mm-hmm. You couldn't. Dresden was a beautiful city. It's an art city.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
And you could see it from the balcony of your attic, or from the window of your attic.
On February 1345, there was the bombing of Bremen. See, that's why they sent us to the East Germany, because the war wasn't that bad. And, there was still very little going on.
It was in the eye of the storm, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so we stood on the balcony, and we saw these bombs falling. And they looked like Christmas tree. That's what they looked like.
Christmas lights?
Yes. There was all, I still have pictures in my mind, about all this. And then, of course, they had a big zoo, so we wasn't allowed to go out because some of the animals were still loose. Yes, so they didn't know which one.
Lions?
Yeah, it could have been anything.
So after they bombed Dresden, they wouldn't let anyone go back in the city because the zoo animals had escaped. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that was part of the danger.
Well, sure, part
obviously.
of it. But what a kind of crazy,
random
side effect.
We wasn't allowed to leave the house for 2 weeks. And because until they found all the animals, what was left. So.
You have a funny story in the book about your mother, and not you, but another, and I'm not going to tell this because we're not going to tell the end of the story for the writer so that y'all will buy the book. Thank you, people. And I'm not going to tell the story about your dad either for the listeners, but Edith, you did not go, but I will say it was an indiscretion. And your mother caught the train with your older sister and went to try and find him and got there, and it was a weekend off, and there was a odd happening. And it broke my heart for your mother and your father. The chances of the timing of all of that were just so human and so just, I don't know. Y'all need to read it, but I'll tell you, Edith's dad got caught in an indiscretion, and it's heartbreaking to me.
Yes, it is. Was.
You've gone through so much. You make one mistake or two, maybe you made a few more. I don't know, but
she surprised him.
Obviously,
it was a surprise.
And just how heartbreaking, how disappointing.
I know.
To make all that effort and to go there and then to have that disappointment and for him, the shame he felt from it all also. It was just the whole thing.
I'll tell you an interesting part about that whole part of the book. That was a part, you're right, an indiscretion. Edith was not keen on letting me write about that. And I twisted her arm again. There are a few things that I did respect her privacy on and did not divulge. But
tell me after the show, will you?
but I did tell her we need to tell this part of the story because it does explain later where her father winds up in the war.
Yeah,
it does.
And so without that linchpin, you don't understand why he is at some point on the front.
It also humanizes them so much because every woman in the world has felt that jealousy and that betrayal. Almost every woman, I would think, at some time. And, you either get over it or you get hardened and, anyway. All right. Dresden gets bombed. And they evacuate you guys again. And the old Mr. Colonel Pfeiffer, the mean Nazi, I don't know what happens to him. Do you? Do you know whatever happened to him?
It's in the book.
It is in the book?
Yeah, it's in the epilogue. Oh. I actually did not know what happened to him, but I wanted to find out.
Well, you don't have to tell if you don't want to.
No, I'm actually fine to tell this.
Okay.
I don't think it's a big, surprise necessarily what happened to him, but it's interesting because we didn't know. And so I thought, well, I wonder if there's a way to find out. So I actually hired a British reporter living in Germany to do some research for me. And she found out that at some point, and now you got to remember that this little Krumhemsdorf, where they're at, is also near the Polish-Czech border, which is where the Soviet Red Army's coming in. So now, of course, you've had, they've run from the west to East Germany to escape, the Allies. Now they've got to be concerned about the Soviet Red Army coming in from the east. They're very close to the east now because that's where they were evacuated to. So anyway, I hired this British reporter for me and had her do some research, and she was able to find out a little bit. But what she found out I thought was pretty significant. Apparently he was captured and he was put into a camp where he did not survive. And this is by the Soviets. I suspect, I don't know, there's no way to really know here, but I don't know why he didn't survive. I suspect they may have been a little rough with him. I have no idea if I'm right on that, but I do know he was captured by the Soviets at the end of the wars.
Oh, you reap what you sow.
You do. Yeah, and
that's really gratifying.
And now we're all like,
thank goodness.
and here's a point too, Kerry. You had mentioned that end of the war, they bombed Dresden. The Soviet Red Army, they hear, is coming in from the east. At this point, the government is not involved. The German government is not involved with them trying to be evacuated back out. It's chaos.
It's a free-for-all.
It is. So it's your own personal responsibility what you do with yourself now. Nobody's calling any shots here.
Because everything's falling apart.
Absolutely. So the Soviet Red Army's coming in.
One side.
They have Marta has gotten to know the Burgermeister, the mayor of the little village, and he comes to tell her one night, the Soviet Red Army's coming in, the war's coming to an end. If you want to get back home, you need to consider doing it. So now this is, to me, really important. This really shows the risk that this little typical German mother is willing to take. She knows that she has only herself to rely on to get her children back home, if at all possible.
And one of them's a year old or 2 years old.
Yeah, so I
guess he's 4 years old now. 3 or 4.
He was born in 40. He was
born in 40, and this
3 and a half,
45. 4. Yeah.
So she's the one that makes the decision, we're leaving in the middle of the night. You know, we've got to leave.
Because the Russians are going to, they're Germans, and so they're going to capture them and put them in a prison war camp.
Exactly. No telling what would happen to us.
Right. And if you've heard a lot of the stories at the end of the war and pictures at the end of the war, real concerns about the retaliation for the earlier invasion of Russia. Mm-hmm. So they're not necessarily kind to Germans, particularly German women, girls. Marta's got a lot to consider. So escaping sounds like the best thing to do.
So tell us about the night you left. Your mom?
Well, we left and we just took a few items.
What you could carry?
Just what we could carry. And we mainly just all clothes on our back. You know, that's all we had. And we left.
Was it cold? Germany can be really cold.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. This was in
March.
When
which is still winter.
Yes. Yes, especially down there.
And you took the pram with you, the stroller.
Yes.
That's the only thing. I worried about that stroller through the whole book.
I like to know what
happened
to it, you know, and I don't remember that.
Well, it's been through a war, as they say. All right, so you leave in the middle of the night. You're walking, and what's the first thing you do? Catch a train?
Well, we took the train to Dresden first.
Okay.
And then from Dresden on, there was no transportation. We had to walk.
How far is Dresden to Bremen? 500 miles?
You know, I don't know.
Seems like I looked this up after the book was over, and it was far.
It's East Germany to West Germany.
East and we're north, see. So
you start walking, and everybody's walking.
Oh, I mean, there was GIs, you know, with crippled GIs and families, and some kids, you know, got lost.
Let's talk about that. On your way there, you're still closed mouth about everything. Nobody's still talking to anybody about anything. You're keeping everything close.
We wasn't allowed to talk about it.
You playing everything close to the chest, keeping everything close to the vest. And so you end up getting kidnapped.
Yes, by the Russians.
And where do you end up?
And it wasn't a real concentration camp, but that's what he kept us in the gym, in the schoolhouse. And we were surrounded by Russian. It had a fence around it. And I call it concentration camp, you know, but it wasn't like the Holocaust, you know, and so, but
something less formal. I mean, I think they found a building, and this is what we're going to use.
I remember sitting in that gym in a circle. We all had to sit on the floor. There was no furniture in there. We had to sleep on the floor. And then once in a while, they'd come in, open the door, and let us out, go to the bathroom and stuff like that. But then we, these two German GIs, after being there for 2 weeks, and they helped us escape. They offered my mom in this 4 mile, which she's in the book. And that's how she lost her son.
So Frau Mauer is a friend that your mother has befriended.
They became friends, yes.
While they're sitting in this gym,
because she was also from Bremen.
Oh.
So they were going to the same, so they got connected and stayed together the whole time.
And these GIs are German GIs?
2 German GIs, and one was on crutches.
And the fear was every night somebody would disappear out of the group. And
I know.
So you're like, when are they going to start taking one of us out? Especially the pretty girls were really disappearing quick. And so these 2 GIs hatch a plan. and y'all do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have had
Isn't
the
that
energy to
amazing?
do that.
No.
Think about it as a mother, though.
With 7 children under
Exactly.
12.
The risk of doing that, trying to keep them quiet. Of course, she's had since 39 trying to keep them quiet.
Yeah.
But that is so amazing to me that she did. She, again, assesses the risk and says, this is worth the risk because I don't know what's on the other side for me or my children if I don't escape.
She doesn't know either way.
Mm-mm.
She takes a huge risk and follows these 2 young GIs. All right, this is going to be our last break. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Miss Edith Röpke. How do we say her name now in German?
Röpke.
How do you say Edith?
Edith.
Edith Röpke.
I think you're
Edith.
supposed to say Harris.
And I was about to get there, son. Now known as Miss Edith Harris. Thank you, son Gray. The protagonist in Miss Cecelia Wilson's nonfiction book, Back to Bremen. When we come back, we'll talk about getting back to Bremen.
Our grandfather served his country during World War II. We use grave markers and stick flags to honor his memory. To those who serve, thank you from all of us at flagandbanner.com.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Miss Cecelia Wilson, author of the book and true story Back to Bremen. Joining her today is Miss Edith Röpke, the protagonist in this nonfiction book, now known as Miss Edith Harris. It is Edith's real-life story that is told in this memoir through the eyes of a 5-year-old girl living in Germany during the war-torn years of World War II. All right, before the break, we talked about living in Bremen as a child and the bombing and the raids, and your mother having a baby in the street during a raid, which is fascinating. We talked about writing the book with Cecelia, about how it unfolded and just poured out of her once she decided to write the book from Edith's 5-year-old persona. And boy, it is really the way to do it. You really hit the nail on the head with that.
Thank you.
And then we talked about having to evacuate Bremen, having to evacuate the Nazi Colonel Pfeiffer's home in a town that none of us can pronounce. Say the name of the town.
Krummherbstorf.
Yeah, see why we can't say it? Gray can say it, I think. Say it, Gray. Try.
Kromhemstoff?
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Good.
he knows a few languages.
Yeah, no, I don't. I know how to sound like I know a few languages.
No, that sounded good.
He has
Very
a good. Yeah, he has a good ear. And then now we've left that town, and we are on foot walking back to Bremen. The war is about to be over. The Russians are coming in from the east. Mm-hmm. The Americans, I guess, are in the west.
Yes.
And so you're looking for the Americans.
Yes.
God love the Americans. And I remember reading that in the book. It's like every time you saw an American, you were like, it's an American, you know.
I know.
It's like the heroes. And then we're now on foot. We were captured by the Russians. Tell us about you. Your mother says, get up. You're in this, I guess, basically a prison war camp in the middle of a big gym, a makeshift prison war camp. And the Russians are standing guard around. But you've hooked up with 2 GI guys who say, and one of them's crippled, he's on crutches. Yep. And he says, we don't know what the future is for us here. It looks bleak. These Russians are not nice guys. Let's break out tonight when they're all asleep. Because they would go off and smoke cigarettes and drink on
yes.
a bunch of dudes. And
some things never change.
20-year-old dudes. I mean, that's what they do, you know. And so your mother gets all 7 of you kids up, tells you to be quiet, and you follow these 2 GI guys out with another family.
Those 2 were from Hanover, and that's another world
close by Bremen.
Yes,
same general area, northwest.
So y'all sneak out and you make it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It took 9.5 weeks.
And so you get out and you start hiding in bushes as you go along the road.
We do. And I don't know if you ever see a World War movie. You crawl under the fence to get into the woods. We actually did that.
To hide from cars?
Yes.
that would come? You'd hear a car coming and you didn't know who they were?
Oh, yeah, because they were after us, And then,
The Russians are after you.
yes. And then we got that, I didn't want to give it away, but we stole that bread.
What now? Say what?
When they stole the bread, the little village where they, at the beginning of the
At the very beginning, the opening chapter.
We crawled under the fence, went to the woods, my brother Karl-Heinz and me. We smelled this bakery. And we went in there. That guy, he was waiting on customers. And so instead of waiting on him waiting on us, we helped ourselves.
Back then, stealing bread, you could have gotten in a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah. We could have been shot. And my mom
Literally shot.
And my mom didn't know where we were.
Yeah.
So she was scared to death.
While you're walking, you continue to talk about how the crowds in the street grew and grew and grew as you got closer to Bremen.
And at night, we had to sleep in the forest, in the grass or whatever place. There was no... we stole from the farmers. That's why I love cabbage, carrots, the green stuff on the carrot. We twisted that off and cleaned the dirt off the carrot and ate it. Nothing. We didn't have no water to wash it or anything. So if we ate dirt and all, and we're still alive.
Love it.
So you scavenged for food, washed in creeks. And how many weeks did you say this took?
9.5 weeks it took.
Was your hair full of lice?
Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, lice. We had lice in the clothes, in the seams. And while we was in this camp, Russian camp, we sit that night and kill the lice.
Ugh.
And I had to.
Kill the lice in the seams of your clothes. That's
Pardon?
great. Killing the lice in the seams of your clothes?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So,
we didn't have no shampoo. We didn't wash hair.
Right.
one of the things that broke my heart about this movie, and I know we're getting close to the end, so I don't want to tell anymore. And this is probably the last thing I'm going to tell. You tell me where to stop. I was going to talk.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the Frau Meyer that was your mother's friend. She had 2 sons, and y'all stayed together. And this is when you realized what a good job Edith's mother, Marta, did, because she had 2 teenage boys to keep up with. Your mother had 7 children to keep up with. Yeah. Only a few were teenagers. And they were in these massive crowds, the closer and closer you got to the city. And she lost one.
Yes. And she never found out again. She went to the Red Cross and everything, and she never found out what happened. Of course, at that time, she didn't know her husband was dead too.
Oh.
So she lost, both of them. But...
and we're talking about just lost in a crowd, just like turn around and, hey, where's Peter?
Yeah.
And you're like, Peter. I've lost my children at Disney World like that before.
And by children, she means me. Twice.
He just wanders off.
I'm glad she found you.
It's a terrible feeling. I cannot imagine how Frau Meyer felt.
And then after they got back to Bremen, she was still searching to the Red Cross, but never found out what happened.
Probably for years later, I'm guessing.
You didn't hire, Cecelia, you didn't hire anybody to find out?
I think that's one of the things that there's not even, it's not even a reality to be able to do that, because there would be so many families in the same situation that I'm sure did their own research during the time, and I'm sure Frau Meyer did probably for years later through the Red Cross. and just could not find anything. So I don't think it would even be possible to do that type of research.
He
There's just no way.
probably, after reading that book, I just thought he got into a Russian prison camp somewhere.
Well, one of the things that I point out to Edith a lot, and I'm sure she has thought of this, but had it not been for her mother's actions, they do get to a point where they come to a crossing where they have to show identification to get back in. And her mother had the foresight to have that identification with them, else they would not have been back in Bremen at all. And what's interesting about that is, had her mother not done all of those things, decided to escape and run with those kids and scavenge for food and escape out of the camp and everything to try to get back to the West, Edith would have been raised behind the Iron Curtain, more than likely.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Or would have got killed,
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have met Hank Harris and moved to Searcy, Arkansas.
That's exactly right. Yes, absolutely. The whole trajectory of her life would have been so different because at the very least, we can suppose she would have been raised in, the East Germany.
So talk about getting to the border. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Edith?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Going from east to west, we had to show proof. And she did.
Your mother?
Yeah, my mother, in her coat jacket she had on, and the lining, she had papers.
She'd sewn the papers into the lining of her coat.
Lining, yes.
Years ago.
Yes.
Like 4 years ago.
Yes.
Before she left Bremen the first time.
Yes. Because you always had to have proof that and back then they didn't have the regular border like they got today or later on in the years. It was just a tree. The Americans had this, so we could see the Americans every time somebody passed, they let through, put the tree down.
Put the tree down?
Yes.
That's what they had
instead of a border crossing like you would think of now with a little arm that comes down.
It was a tree.
Because it was, those borders were so new, and the war was ending. They just said, makeshift arm, we'll just cut a tree off, and that's going to be the arm that prevents you.
Why weren't people coming around the borders all in the other areas, or could you? Did you have to go through this? I mean, couldn't you have done like they're crossing the Rio Grande?
We had to prove that otherwise they wouldn't have let us through. They wouldn't let any East people back to the West.
So you get back to Bremen, you get in the back of a truck with a bunch of people.
But going back to the border.
Yes.
The tree was about halfway down. And I still see that picture. And because we thought we were going to get hit with the tree, we was afraid. And there was this Russian patrol car came, open Jeep with guys with guns. And they was trying to get us. But the last minute, my mom had proof that we were from the West, and the Americans let us through.
Before the Russians came and took the rest of the people.
We saw them coming.
You were the last person through?
Yes.
That's a movie right there.
Yeah, right.
It is a movie, isn't it? I've always told her that.
So cinematic.
It is. And everything about it. I told her this 20 years ago when we first started talking about this. I told her back then, this should be a book and it should be a movie. So she's right when I say I was always twisting her arm, but it really does read very much like a movie. Mm-hmm. If you didn't know it, you'd think, oh, you're making that up.
It does read like a movie.
It does, and yet it's now. And the only reason that I don't like giving the end away.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the end anymore. Yeah, we're stopping.
And
right
the only reason I don't is because as a reader or in watching a movie, the worst thing in the world was my sister to tell me the ending of a movie. It's like, why did you tell me that? So I really think it's important to leave something for the reader to wonder about. Okay, what happened? How's this resolved? I do resolve everything for them, but I will go as I've had children ask me this in classes. Well, no, did everyone stay together? And I said, well, let me just tell you this. Mm-hmm. When they get back to Bremen, there is no home, there is no neighborhood. It's just demolished. They're having to.
Don't tell everybody.
Right, but here's what I will tell people is that when they get back to Bremen, the family is not intact, and it takes several years before the story is resolved, and what happens to everyone else. And I think that's what I want to leave for the reader, because I think it is an amazing story. And I do like to wrap up those loose ends and do at the end. But it is an amazing story that does, I think, honestly, read like a movie.
She did a terrific job.
She did
book.
a terrific
I tell you what,
I know.
I did. Tell you the truth, I never thought the book would go anywhere. This is surprising.
Well, let me just tell you, it may be a movie one day. I really believe it could be a movie one day. And if I was a producer,
Big-time
I'd
producer.
it. But I do know a few.
Oh, good. Okay. I have a Facebook author page and a website, so give me a call. It is absolutely, and I do mean this. I know I'm the author, so you expect me to say this, but this is a story I have known for 20 years. I absolutely love the story, and I really do love hearing from people that have read it and share with me what they think about it, because I'm very passionate about it, because it is a beautiful story, and it's true. That's what's so cool about it.
That is what's cool about it.
Yes.
Speaking of that, how do you buy the book?
It is on. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's in e-format or paperback or hardcover.
Does somebody read it? Is there an audio? An audio?
There is not an audio book. We talked about doing one at one time, and nothing ever came of that. But you can get it in more than one format. Backtobremen.com is my is my website, and then I do have Cecelia Wilson author page on
What's
Facebook.
Goodreads?
So.
What's the Goodreads? What does that mean?
Goodreads is a site that people go to and share books. And
isn't it kind of like a Rotten Tomatoes for books? Like it's you talk about books and
kind of, sort of.
Okay,
yes.
Well, you can go read about it.
Yes,
there.
Yes, exactly. So there's plenty of ways to get it. Oh yeah, absolutely.
They don't need to call you.
They can, but they can absolutely go to these websites and get them much faster, and probably delivered to them much
Cecelia
faster.
Wilson is the author. Edith Röpke is the
Edith Röpke.
Edith Röpke.
He's so good at it.
I know.
You're trying, Mom. It's okay. You're
I
trying.
know he sounds like a German.
I like German school.
And now Edith Harris is her maiden name and
married name.
Married name.
Right.
Sorry, married name. Thank you. But yes, you can buy the book Back to Bremen. Last question, Edith. Do you have any lasting irregularities from your experiences, like sleeping with the light on, eating all the food on your plate?
That is, my kids grew up, they had to eat everything on their plate. I said, we're not going to throw anything out. And today I still do.
I bet you never go camping, do you?
No.
I can't imagine wanting to go camping if I slept outside for 4 years.
She's done that. So
no, my husband was a camper. I mean, he liked to, fish and hunt and all that. He was born and raised in Texas, but he moved to Arkansas. And I didn't want to come to Arkansas because we lived in Colorado Springs. He was stationed at the Air Force Academy. I just loved that place.
It's a beautiful place.
Yes.
The Garden of the Gods.
But aren't you glad you came to Arkansas?
But yeah, no, I'm here.
And she's been here for many years.
And you met him in the war, after the war?
Yes, in the first part of 57.
He was liberating Bremen?
No,
decade later.
No.
Decade after the war.
That was in 50. Yeah.
How did you meet him 10 years later?
I was working at the snack bar on the base. Matter of fact, I just got that job to a friend of mine.
In Bremerhaven.
And my job was to do salads. So I was in the kitchen making the salad for lunch. And so the supervisor came in, and he said, "Go out the grill. The girl on the grill called in sick." So he made me move to the front and work the grill. And here all these GIs coming in. I said, "I can't do this." I said, "How do I mean, I didn't know a fried egg on a grill or anything like that, breakfast, So he said, "Oh, just put them on the grill, flip them over." He said, "And they don't know the difference."
Did you speak English?
I learned the English type.
British. English.
That's a little bit.
When did you learn that?
In school.
Oh, you did?
After the war, more or less.
Yes. So everybody thought that I was English when I first came to the States.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a wonderful interview. I cannot thank you two ladies enough for coming in. You are just both wonderful people. Thanks for...
Thank you for having us.
We enjoyed it. We love talking about the story.
Well, if I'd have known you were from Texas or from Colorado, I'd have given you a Texas and Colorado flag. But I did give you a desk set with a German flag, a U.S. flag, and an Arkansas flag.
Well, look I saw that.
That's for you.
Thank you.
And Cecelia, you too get a German flag because you love World War II.
I do. Thank you so much.
I never did really.
Love it.
Y'all,
I love it.
I never did really ask you why you have such a fascination with World War II, but why do you?
I've always loved history. Always. Throughout
it is a fascinating
school,
part.
It really is, and I'm not just focused on World War II, but I really love World War II. It is a fascinating part of history. And it is true. They are the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. And I know your parents' story, and I'm in love with their story. And I have a connection to that. I was born and raised in Batesville, and your mother went to school in Batesville.
She was raised there, too.
That just makes me love that story. I have a connection to that. So I don't know. There's just something about... I think that's why it's important for kids to study history. There's so much to learn. My goodness, we don't want to make the same mistakes, but hey, let's emulate what they did right. And Marta is a history lesson all in herself.
Great place to end the show. In closing, to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us. We hope you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your life, your independence. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For more of Kerry's interviews, click on either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.